I lost a huge amount of potential yield due to heat and rain stress. There's real money that I missed that I could have had. How do I bridge those times to when I can make it to the next rain?
Growers are very smart businessmen. They need to have pretty good evidence, not just that it works. They want to understand the reasons why it works.
They can see it in your body language if a product is something you're putting a hard pressure on to sell, or if you believe in what you're saying. So I was convinced. I'd seen the product work on all different types of crops. We saw yields on corn range from 8 to 25 bushel. On beans, 5 to 8. We want to temper expectations, but we're pretty darn excited at what we're seeing.
We're going to need to have the ability to produce enough food to feed our world population. And at the same time, without running out of the resources to do it. This is going to become, over the next decades, one of the most important issues for humanity to solve.
We can definitely show that we had an 11 bushel difference between the acres treated with TERRAMAR and those that were not.
When you go through the field, you could see the 5 or 8 bushel jump on the yield.
By creating these biostimulants out of naturally occurring microorganisms, we are reducing the need to use up non-renewable resources.
I really believe that TERRAMAR can be the missing link in what we're trying to achieve.
I think TERRAMAR is going to be a game changer for us.
There are millions of bacteria and fungi in every gram of soil. They want to live and reproduce, obviously, but they need help to do that. And so there is this exchange going on under our feet in the soil all the time. And it's this exchange of carbon for nutrients that our biostimulant products help to enhance.
Rapid growth, like what you're talking, typically that's showing zinc or manganese though.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Look like John McGillicuddy there pointing out the green.
You don't see John doing this. It's all in the new growth too though.
Mm-hmm.
Agriculture goes back on both sides of my family, on my parents' side and my mother's side, and I knew from early age that farming was what I wanted to do.
Born and raised here, 5th generation. Hopefully raised in the 6th. 1920. My great-grandpa had part ownership in a bank in Nyota and got out about 8 months before everything collapsed and bought this piece of ground.
LCL Farms is my wife and my business. We ran the airport. My uncle used to land right here in this field.
About 5 miles straight that direction lies the Mississippi River. It's one thing down here in the river bottoms, actually a lot of it is pretty sandy. Even the real heavier, what we call gumbos, are really silty soil types.
I was just blessed that my ancestors liked the bluff instead of stopping down there by the river. Muscatine silt loam, that's one of the top soils you can have in the state.
We've won the nation back in 2009 in the Central Division, and then pretty well done first, second, or third in the state of Iowa 20 years, and we've ranked in the contest 17 of them.
I thought I had the best crop ever last year, well into the 400 pluses, but I was about 2 rains shy. I lost a huge amount of potential yield due to heat and rain stress. Corn at that time was $6 plus. Together, that's a lot of money per acre. And so that's where the story of TERRAMAR is like, oh, that might be a good fit.
We had Steve Sexton come up and we had him talk a little bit about TERRAMAR and what it brings to the table for us.
So we had this meeting and we talked about TERRAMAR. So TERRAMAR has got 2 very unique technologies. One is a kelp extract, and people say, oh, kelp's been on the market for years, and it has, but it's all KOH extracted. But here at Agrison, we biologically digest the kelp, so we get 100% digestion. So you have all the bioactives from that kelp plant that had to survive in cold ocean water. It had to photosynthesize in refracted sunlight, and then live in a 3% saline solution, so it has osmotic pressure 24/7. And then when the tide goes out, it gets scorched by the sun. So we extract all of those actives out of that kelp, plus we biologically digest linardite. Nobody else has done that. Plus we have these organic acids that work quickly inside the plant to mineralize nutrients and promote plant growth. Even when it's hot out, when other plants are curling up, the TERRAMAR treated plants are still photosynthesizing.
Just from that meeting alone, we sold 2,500 gallons of TERRAMAR that day.
What stuck is the opportunity to put a product in a pass I'm already making and then have that product bring something to the table that I didn't have before. It wasn't a fertilizer, it wasn't a fungicide, so it was something else I could put in, plug in, and actually see how it works.
If TERRAMAR can take off the stress, it'll be a game changer to help our yields and help improve everything.
We've started to use the product now on some early post-application on corn, and then later at tassel time.
My goal is max. So whatever the maximum yield I can get with the minimum amount of inputs, that's what I'm after.
There's no shame in trying it and seeing how it goes.
When you put your net in the water, you try to rake in as many things as you can to try to improve, to go forward and get better. But you gotta have your net in the water, I think.
By the end of the year, we'll probably have 300 or 400 acres in various scenarios that we will either have 1 or 2 passes of TERRAMAR on.
Chris Lindner will tell me, Lance Holtzclaw, Joe Zumwalt, they'll tell you if something works, they're happy. And if it doesn't work, they say, you know, we're not seeing much. They'll be straight up. So there won't be any dancing around. They'll tell us.
Back in 1999 and the early 2000s, all we knew at that point really was that it worked. The challenge was taking a process that would take on average 45 days from start to finish. That wasn't scalable. My challenge was, how could I reduce that 45-day cycle time down to about 7? We started putting together pilot systems, testing different methods for making an industrial scalable process. And I arrived at this multi-staged fermentation cereal process.
Stress. This season for 2023, especially here in Western Illinois and Hancock County, has been stress. One stress after another. From May 15th, there was pieces of this county that only had about a ½ inch of rain until June 29th. Then when June 29th came around, that was when the derecho came through. It was gut-wrenching driving through town, seeing down trees, seeing damage to some of the houses and power lines down. The further north I got, the worse that it continued to get. It was like you were going through a war zone. It was just disaster one after another. When you see something like that, it just really puts your life in a whole different perspective immediately, right then and there. Very first thing I did was I called the babysitter where my girls were at. The very first thing was, hey, is everything okay? Everybody fine? It scares you,
I would say we're just about dead center of where it came through this area. A lot of damage, a lot of grain bins down. Lost 60% of my storage.
You can't even imagine the damage. Grain bins and farmsteads just totally destroyed. Rolled for miles. I mean, just like a pop can you threw in the air and hard telling where you'd find it.
The corn was flat for a day. I mean, boot high, flat. And then over the next handful of days, it slowly stood back up to where you can see it now. It's not back to full height because there's about 1.5 feet that's in an elbow. But it is back up to where the ear's gonna catch pollen. And so we still have a chance to raise a I would say an average crop.
North of us, it was a little bit worse. We got a little bit of damage, but nothing like some of the other ones. We were fortunate. I mean, if it was gonna hit, it was the best time probably to hit. It was right before tasseling.
It was right before reproduction stages started here in our corn. If it would have happened, another week later, it could have been devastating for pollination here. The drought we had, that was a blessing, honestly, because it really stacked the nodes on this corn. Our corn is about 1.5 feet shorter than it normally is this time of year. And when those nodes are stacked tighter together, that stalk is stronger.
Well, we're gonna try like the best we can to get what's there cleaned up and new bends up. We were fortunate when you were here last, we put on a TERRAMAR pass that had fungicide in it as well, so it did a little protection up front.
I don't know if I'd lose any bushels on the deratio as much as I did on the dryness. Oh, I would say we're off probably maybe 10–15% already. On my hill ground, we're probably even lower, probably about 140. How the corn looks, it looks like it's as good as it can be for being about 6–8 weeks without rain. You live the farm life, you gamble the farm life.
We're basing all of our new technologies on our core P2 platform. The consistency and the efficacy has improved greatly. We have also been able to refine our design formulas to create these new products to fill new applications in the field.
We had a lot of guys that came in and decided to kind of spend a little money and try to alleviate some of the stress that this corn was going through. Man, they just said, give me something that's gonna get me an extra couple weeks here. What we did is we went out with TERRAMAR. Those guys are extremely happy that they made those applications. Visually, they could see the darker, healthier plants about a week after that application. TERRAMAR is playing a very key role in reproduction, respiration, utilizing energy more efficiently.
On our early applications on corn, we could see some plant health differences for sure. We could definitely also see stress tolerance improved on some of the lighter ground that we applied. It was about V4, V6 corn that we applied early. And when you dug root masses, looked at plants, you could definitely see improved stress tolerance, improved plant health.
The TERRAMAR field that we have down there right now looks like it didn't have as much stress on it. The corn is further along, it's tasseled. It didn't look like it got stressed as much. The TERRAMAR corns, the leaves aren't as folded. Yeah, just drive by, you can tell it.
There's plenty of aerial applications that suffice, do good enough. I wanted better than that, and so we're putting on 20-gallon. The other part of it is just justification. The rig's already in my shed. It took some modification to get it high enough to go over the corn. But once you make that modification, then it's pretty easy grab. So hopefully this pass will get us to the finish line.
Is it going to be a record-breaking crop? Probably not. But I think it's going to be a good year to test out products like TERRAMAR because you had that stress during the growing season. I think this is a good year for TERRAMAR's advantages to come out.
The day that deratio went through, the second day I called my crop insurance guy and I said, you probably just want to write me a check now because that's gone. But he came out and he assured me it'd stand back up and make some corn, so. And it did stand back up.
Sure, 250 farm average would make me happy, but is that realistic given the stresses we've been or the stresses we may endure yet? Who knows? But I think all I can do is try to keep every acre as healthy as possible, and Mother Nature will do the rest.
It sure looks that way, that TERRAMAR is going to be a good product. It won't really prove itself till you go through the combine.
It's remarkable to see what we have come from. We're down to the point of understanding what genes are regulated up or down that control the plant's response to various stresses. have over 5,000 microbes in our collection. It gives us the tools to develop a new targeted technology to meet the needs that growers will have. And in doing so, help them get better yields and help them take better care of the environment that they're growing their crops in.
Here.
So this corn starts here and ends there. So that is no longer in the row. You know, when the wind knocks that corn down like that, it's kind of like taking a garden hose and kinking a knot in it and then expecting water to go through it. It's the same thing with the nutrients flowing into these ears. It just doesn't work the way it ought to.
Starting out the year, we had adequate moisture. We got the crop in very good and early. It was perfect. But then in May, it started the drought. We did not get any real measurable precipitation for 50 days. It's emotional for these guys in the field because they're having to deal with, down corn. With Lane, we're talking 80 to 100 bushel lower than what he's normally shooting for.
So much damage in the corn crop. It's going to be a challenging fall to get the corn in the combine, let alone analyze yield data. So I usually chase about 100 bushel better than I'm going to get. And so the performance items like TERRAMAR just aren't going to have a chance to shine.
Are you going to try TERRAMAR next year?
I am. I'm going to scratch this year like it never happened and start over again. If it wasn't for religion and my ability to lay my problems at the feet of Jesus Christ in the morning and the evening, I probably wouldn't be out here because it's that bad.
I don't think they're surprised that they see the differences in yield. I think they're surprised that they see the visuals as late as they are.
The plant is still partially alive or not dying as quickly on the areas that were treated with TERRAMAR. We were able to keep that plant alive and processing, building food and photosynthesizing longer. We have 320 acres where we split the field. The whole field had fungicide. One half of that 320 acres had TERRAMAR added to it. And what is very noticeable in that trial is the plant health difference. We're noticing substantially higher kernel counts and depth of those kernels from the areas treated with TERRAMAR.
Yeah, I mean, it stayed greener longer. It was healthier looking corn. The TERRAMAR kept it healthy and kept it green, and it looked good.
So we had several trials where we put it on halves of fields on really tough acres. We had one field in particular that we sprayed V4 to V6. Everything else as far as planting date, variety, harvest date, everything else was the same. We saw an 11 bushel difference from the half of the field that was sprayed with TERRAMAR to the half of the field that wasn't. That gives you about a 5 to 6 times ROI on the cost of that TERRAMAR.
So we had about a 3 bushel increase. ROI probably was a 3 to 1.
With Chris's results that we saw with TERRAMAR and his V5 pass was, that was a little bit on the light side for my liking. I really wanted to see, the 5 to 6 bushel return in that application.
We didn't do the second pass that we should have probably, so that would be a little bit of it.
I think something that we learned, yes, it has some results in stressful conditions, but I think we're learning that maybe in the higher end yield areas, we were maybe seeing some better results in that area.
And yes, we had some corn go 315 on where the TERRAMAR was in the contest. Ended up in the, I think it was second or third in the state of Iowa.
It just seems like we had odd stretches of stress on our crop throughout the growing season.
I think the most appealing thing on the TERRAMAR side is the return that we saw from the trials that we did this year. We had the 10 bushel response on Joe in the post application. We had a 4.5 bushel average across 4 different trials in the fungicide application on Joe. We had a 3 bushel response on that early post application on corn for Chris, and one of the highest yield environments that I for sure saw in 2023.
We'll probably try it on soybeans too.
I think it very much warrants additional use on my own farm next year.
There's not a lot of things that are out there in the world that are going to give you a 6-to-1 return, no matter what it is. If we can take that and put that into their pockets, then we've done our job.